welcome to the American Theater Wing's Working in the Theater seminars. Now in their 24th year, they are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And as many of you already know, the Wing is more than the Tony Awards. And these Tony Awards are given for distinguished achievement in the theater. We are an organization whose year-round programs are dedicated to serving the theater and the community, and with the goal of developing new audiences. To achieve that goal, we have created audience development programs for students, like Introduction to Broadway, and through our newest program, Theater in School Theater, professionals like those you will meet today go directly into classrooms to work with and talk to students about working in the theater. In addition, we have our hospital program, which dates back to World War II and the Stage Door Canteen. We bring the magic of theater to those who cannot get to the theater itself. We are proud of the work we do, happy to have this wonderful working relationship with the theatrical community, and are grateful to everyone who makes what the American Theater Wing does possible. We hope that you will enjoy and learn from today's seminar, which is extremely important. Let me introduce today's panel. On your right, Shirley Herz, Association of Theatrical Press Agents and Managers, Bernice Weiler, Association of Theatrical Press Agents and Managers, Dean Brown, United Scenic Artists Costume Design, and Julianne Boyd, Society of Stage Directors and Choreographers, George White, President of Eugene O'Neill Theater Center, and our most esteemed director, both here and abroad, and Conard Fowkes, Actors Equity Association, Muriel Stockdale, United Scenic Artists, Barry Moss, Casting Society of America. Now, I shall turn it over to our moderator, George White, who will begin by questioning these heads of the unions and guilds and societies as to what it is and why it is that makes the theater work. George, would you go on now?
Yes, thank you, Isabel. I'm delighted to have this panel and this program because it's one that isn't generally, these are issues that we don't generally have in these seminars. And I hope we can get a little controversial here too today, because the unions in so many areas, I'm sorry we don't have either the musicians or the stagehands with us, but we have almost all of the rest of the theater represented today. And, you know, I think it's important to find out why are there unions? Why do we need unions? We've heard, well, the unions, we've even heard the unions are killing the theater. The expense of the theater is due to the unions. It's at their feet. All of these things go on. And the unions are a very vital part of, and a necessity, I feel, as a member of Julianne's union myself. But I think everybody should hear why. But to start, I think we should begin, and ask Barry first, and if we could go around a little bit, not how do you get into the union if you're not in the union, but how did you specifically get into your union? What intrigued you and what does your union do? I think all of those things would be a good way to start our program.
Well, right off the bat, we're not a union yet. We're a collection of professional casting directors who are attempting to become a union.
Why?
For protection, for benefits, for the idea. The reason we formed this guild is that everybody thinks that their niece's boyfriend can cast a movie or a play or a TV show, that it's such an easy thing to do. And we wanted to let the public know, and also people in the industry know, that there are certain people who have been in it a long time, who are professional, who know what they're doing, and they can put the letters CSA beside their name, and that's the reason we fight so hard to get those letters. Distinguish between the people who just had it fall in their lap and really don't know what they're doing, and those of us, like my partner Julie Hughes and I, have been in the business for 20 years. And so there's strict regulations in getting into the union. You have to have online credit for several years. You have to have 2 letters of recommendation by other members of the association, and you have to be voted on by the entire membership.
Wow.
But what happened with me was a little easier because the organization was founded on the West Coast, and when they decided to expand it to the East Coast, they invited several of us to be the founding members of the East Coast branch, and I was one of them. So,
Muriel, do you have to draw a straight line?
Well, it's a good idea if you can draw a straight line. But you can use a ruler, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I feel very privileged and honored to be a member of the United Scenic Artists, Local 829. It's, in a lot of ways, a union that is more of a guild, that is a representation of great quality and skill. So when I joined, 15 years ago, I was really excited, really excited to join. And
How did you get in? What do you have to do?
I had to, at that time, things have changed now, but at that time you had to take an exam. First you had to show your portfolio and then take an exam, and I can draw very well, so I was very lucky. They let me in without taking the exam, which made me feel pretty good. I wasn't looking forward to that exam.
What was on the exam, or is this? I'm
well,
pushing because I think people should know.
I originally took, the first exam that I took was for costume design, and later I took a scenery exam. And the exam consisted of doing the designs for a show that was assigned to you by the union, kind of like a college project. And really working out the whole design of the show and then being able to discuss it intelligently. The assignment at that time was the interview with the vampire. So it was a wonderful piece of material. I feel it's great to be part of a union because there's protection in terms of your fees and rates and on-the-job protection in terms of liability, health, and welfare, and things like that.
Conard, tell us about now. Equity is it the oldest union? And I know it started as a secret society in an upstairs room in the Players Club.
Yes, at the Players, yes.
And well, you might give a little background on how you got into it.
Well, I think Hollywood, in its depiction of early theater, did a pretty good job of seeing how actors were ill-treated by those who hired them, that they were often stranded in the boondocks, that they rehearsed for no money. I understand, to digress a second, that opera singers will not go on and do the last act until somebody comes around and pays them. I don't know whether the story's apocryphal or not, but the actors were never quite as clever as the opera singers, so we would all go do the whole show and not get paid. And it was these abuses that moved the actors to strike here in New York and to form an association, which in fact is a union. But association, I think, really says as much as the word union does. Performers who are so-called freelance persons do not have a structure to move into the way other professions do. If you're a doctor, a lawyer, businessman, there is a structure which you enter. You go to school and you learn. And even if you're a lousy lawyer, you'll probably get a job. And you can expect to receive pay raises as you go along and receive the loyalty of the company for whom you work. And the older you get, the more money you get, and you can look forward to retirement. Performers don't have that. There is no structure. It's chaos out there. And the associations, certainly for performers, and it may be so for the other creative elements in the theater, offers a structure, not one that is completely fulfilling, but it's something. And of course, the most obvious benefits are the wages and working conditions. Performers unhappily will work for nothing. For a while, anyway. And they did work for nothing. But young performers entering the business now, should they work under union contracts, are guaranteed if not always a living wage, because a living wage is not to be made in some of the smaller theaters. If there is a living wage to be made, the association equity will, on behalf and in behalf of the performers, see that they get that living wage, and toilet paper in the bathroom, and light and heat, and get paid. And we have a bonding policy.
Explain that bonding, how that works for the
Well,
civilians.
if you're going to mount a production, it does get a little complicated if you are a regional theater, for instance, and you have an entire season of productions. But basically, it's how many people you have in the cast. Let us cover 2 weeks of salary. We'll put that money into escrow, and if something goes wrong, that money will be there to pay the actors and to pay their health premiums and put money into their pension fund. And the health and pension funds are something else again, about which I could go on forever, but I won't. But think about this. You are a performer. Over the course of time, should you be lucky enough to have a career, you may work, and this is not hyperbole, for 200 or 300 different people. How on earth can those people provide you with a pension plan or a health plan? Cannot be done. But an association, a union, and some genius a few years ago figured out a way that performers can have a health plan and a pension plan. And it is to those geniuses who have preceded me that I give eternal thanks. Because I have a health plan and I have 3 pension plans, which is more than some, if you pardon the expression, civilians can lay claim to. But the bonding is, which you don't get in other areas of performing. You don't necessarily get those when you're working in television or other movies, but you get it in the theater. And believe me, those bonds are called upon constantly, because the theater is a tricky business. As far as its finances are concerned, and producers with the best intentions, the most honorable folks, can run afoul of bad luck and suddenly find that there's no money in the box office. But I don't know whether the scenic artists are going to get paid out of that or not. But the actors.
Well, that's great. Julianne, tell me about SSD&C, Society of Stage Directors and Choreographers. It's a relatively new guild. And how did that come about, and how did you end up in it?
Yes.
It is a union.
Yeah, it's interesting, the differentiation, but it is a union. It's called Society, so one would not necessarily know that the Society of Stage Directors and Choreographers is a union, but it is. Well, SSDC actually became official in 1962, when, as many, I think, unions and guilds are formed, when Bob Fosse said he would not go into rehearsal for Little Me unless he got a union contract. And that's how the union was formed. The producers, then it was the League of New York Producers, now it's American Producers, said, okay, they wanted Bob Fosse. And oftentimes I think when the unions and guilds get anything, it's because one person whom the other side wants says, no, if you want me to work for those conditions or those terms or whatever, you need to give me this. And in this instance, it was a contract. And Bob Fosse was instrumental, and Agnes DeMille was very, very instrumental in the founding of the union, and a group of directors and choreographers who felt, I think, very alone. I mean, what everyone is saying is the same thing. I think the directors, choreographers are the only ones. There's one director on a show, maybe a choreographer if there's a musical, and there's no one else to talk to about your similar needs in the situation. So that if you're going out of town to work at X theater, we won't name the theater, but it's probably the same theater where the bond was used. And you say, hey, what were the conditions there? And they'll say, watch it, get your money way ahead of time. Or, the housing isn't really nice, so you better ask for something. Or, so you find out some terms about a place where you're going to work. So it's really a place where directors and choreographers can communicate with one another.
Shirley and Bernice, since you both represent APAM, why do you need a union? Aren't you the people that deal with the unions?
True. However, not unlike equity, we used to have road managers that'd be out on the road 3-4 weeks in advance of a show that might just close, not tell him, and he'd be there without train fare or whatever to get back to New York. So that bunch of the old-timers got together, and they formed a union, or an association at that point, and bonds were sought, and they didn't budge unless there was a bond there. And that was one of the reasons for forming the press agents, I think, joined up in with the treasurers in those days.
1938.
Then the managers
When was
came
that?
in.
1938.
Really? Early on. Well, that was the time when the road, that people were pulling those things
Exactly.
all the
We
time.
in 11th, all those illustrious producers that would take the money and run and leave the companies wherever they were.
Would you explain, General Manager, the duties?
As opposed to, let's say, yeah, that's a good
Well,
point.
manager.
Actually,
As opposed to when a
the
producer
union
is.
does not represent general managers. They only represent company managers who work for the general managers and press agents.
Would you make that distinction for the audience so they know what?
Certainly, a producer, when he finds his piece of material and decides that he wants to hire people, will hire a general management firm. And it used to be years ago that the producers who worked year-round would have a GM on their staff on a year-round basis. But now they don't do it as often, and I have said many times that general managers now audition for their jobs. And because the producers go around to various managers looking for them and decide who they would like to hire, then that general manager is responsible for the producer, to the producer rather, and does all of the work that has to be done to get the production together.
But he
the-
may be working on more than one production at a time.
Absolutely. Whereas a company manager can only work on one production at a time. And the company manager does the payrolls, the work, is the contact very often with the cast. The general manager will usually work with the director doing the contracts and the major contracts. The company manager then follows through on what happens. And usually what happens is that our company managers become general managers and have their own firms. For instance, I had a general management firm for a long time, and then some years ago, it was brought to my attention that wouldn't it be a good idea if you worked for the union? And I thought, what a smashing idea. I know both sides. As a matter of fact, Conrad and I have negotiated contracts together, and it's very interesting how you go from one to another all the time. And you have to know all the aspects of theater in order to really be a good manager. And even you have to know what the press agent does. Very often a general manager or a company manager will sit in on all the press conferences. You will do the bid sessions with designers. You will hire the casting
The
directors.
general manager has become the producer. It used to be that Leland Haywood had his office and Herman Bernstein was there. And Eddie Mill was with St. Suber, and everyone had their own general manager, and the general manager didn't pay rent. Today, the general manager pays the rent, and the producer just hires him. And oftentimes, the producer isn't even a theater person.
So
These days,
end up
very
being-
often.
Yeah, they end up being, and I've seen this personally too, that with either the general manager or the company manager is a teacher. Somebody who's
absolutely.
made money in Wall Street and has to become a
Absolutely.
teacher of how you do things, as opposed to the old
Right.
days.
Where do you all come in? The producer has the money, and he is going to produce a show. Who comes on board
Well, it's
first?
changed again. A producer used to call you and say, I want you
Calls
to do
you
my
as a press
publicity.
agent, right?
Now, you audition like an actor. You present your ideas and how you would handle the show, and you do a tap dance for either one producer or the whole consortium of producers.
Well, no, isn't that where you need protection? Particularly if you're going to say
It's too
this is an idea.
competitive for protection. They call 2, 3, 4 press agents.
And they do the same with general managers.
Uh-huh. Yeah. and-
Well, that's a vice president or a general manager for the company. He's not going to take the first one. He's going to go out and say,
Well, no one's gonna
let me
steal-
interview a couple of people.
No one's going to steal my audition, but I can see somebody stealing your audition. since you
Yeah,
came up with
exactly, that's what I'm
ideas.
saying.
But the producing organization used to be an entirely different entity. There were producers who did nothing but theater, and they had the general managers and the press agents and so forth, and they developed the scripts. Now, oftentimes, the scripts go to the director. The director then, works with the playwright developing the script. It then goes to a producer because the producers may be, as you say, you know, on Wall Street, where my favorite is a jeans manufacturer, you know, and you try to find someone who has the money, and the first thing they do, I think, if they like the script and they want to move ahead, is they hire the general manager to make sure they don't make any mistakes. If they don't,
That's
now,
the teacher again.
right now, I think there are a few large, you know, producing entities in New York who don't do this. This isn't all producing entities. I mean, the Schuberts don't do it this way. The Nederlanders do Jamson. The three large entities certainly have their own teams, pretty much. Yes, pretty
Depends.
much. Pretty right. However, a lot of the smaller independent producers, I think, look to all of us to kind of put together a whole organization, and we're all freelance. So it's like each time, I mean, what you were saying is true, each time you feel as if you're auditioning anew and you think you won't get the next job, there's no next job, and then you get one the next month. Or it doesn't look good these 6 months, and all of a sudden you're overwhelmed. So it's a very, you know, kind of difficult, tenuous existence if you don't know where the next...
The other thing is, a producer was a producer, and he produced one show after another.
Right.
And unless you did something horrific, he would hire you for every show. Or Herman Shumlin would have Bill Dahl do show after show after show, so that you didn't audition, and you didn't have to.
And it was the same, I think, for general managers and everyone else. But what's happening now with the advent of Live Ed and Disney, you're going back to the year-round kind of person who is working, or group that is working all the time, except that you're dealing now with entities that are much larger and much stronger.
Let's everybody get into that, because we have 42nd Street, the very nature of the 42nd Street is changing big time, and major heavy-duty companies are coming in there. What is that going to do to all of you, or for you?
Well, they're not.
2 or 4?
Well, basically, if I may, where we used to be involved on collective bargaining agreements with the league, Disney and Live Ed
And wait a minute, okay,
not joined
I'm
the
just going to
league.
stop you, Bernice, a second. I know what you're saying, but I think, let's again back up. Explain that you, at PAM, as an entity, dealt with...
the League of American Theaters and Producers.
So there were 2 negotiating entities for everybody's...
As all the other unions did.
Right.
All our unions.
Right.
So that, you know, it was not a phenomenon for APPAM.
It was us and Bernie Jacobs, right?
At the table.
Yes,
And
remember.
it was us and Jerry Schoenfeld and
Right.
so on. I mean, we each had our person at the league. Now,
Now there are 2 producers on 42nd Street who are not members.
Of the league, correct.
Can you still deal with these as union
Individuals.
leaders?
now we are negotiating with them
Unions.
separately.
Yes.
There's no...
But
no
negotiating with the league has changed, too.
How was that changed?
Well, you had Bernie, we had Jerry, and
Bernie's gone now.
that was it. This year, negotiations were run by lawyers.
That's correct.
Lawyers. Well,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Changed. It's Bernie Jacobs, who was a wonderful man, and although we were across the table from him, contract after contract, we really loved him, and his daughter was in the his daughter is an equity
Still
member.
is.
Right. She's
So
state manager also.
there was a part of Bernie that we knew we could always count on, but now, as it's been mentioned, we now would deal with suits, men and women in suits. What has happened in Hollywood, or what is alleged to have
What do you
happened
mean,
in
Minnie?
Hollywood?
Explain that. What do you mean?
Well, they're not people of the theater. They
I see,
are
okay.
money managers, people with MBAs,
Yeah,
perhaps, and the bottom line is what really counts. I don't want to get gushy about this, but there's no...
Go ahead.
The heart isn't there. I mean, with Bernie Jacobs, you knew there was a heart there. It's tough to
This
negotiate
is
as
so
it was.
interesting because he was one of the toughest negotiators I've always heard.
But fair,
And
very
but
fair.
everyone said the same thing about
You
him.
sat down at the table this year with the feeling they were out to break the union.
Yes.
Really? Let's go some more
I
with it.
haven't
Go
felt
ahead.
that. Yeah, I mean, I agree that Disney and Live Ed, which is a Canadian-based producing organization, which I think has an office here in New York
Yes,
as
they
well.
do.
Live Ed New
Yes, they
York,
do.
Live Ed Canada, and has produced things like Showboat, Candide, which is opening tonight, and so forth. And we also are negotiating separately with Disney and Live Ed. to me, one of the problems on 42nd Street is almost not Disney and Live Ent, but the other producers who won't negotiate with us. I mean, if someone, as a union member, I'm going to forget whether I like them or I dislike them. I mean, my job as president of the union is to get contracts for our members. So if they'll negotiate with us, then, and if they negotiate fairly, and the negotiations proceed, whether we win or we lose, if we all come to compromise somewhere, fine. But it's the ones who won't negotiate with you that we mind, and there are some producers getting involved in theaters on 42nd Street who are turning their backs on the union, say we don't need the unions, and this, I think, may be, I don't want to say a more difficult problem, but it's certainly something that we have to look at.
So what's the problem, the public might ask? Well, the problem is, and I'll go back to something I said earlier, there's chaos out there, and we're trying to bring some order to it. This is, we attempt to make a living doing this. We don't do this out of some altruistic reason to entertain the public. And once you start gnawing away or hacking away at the economic base, things will begin to fall apart, and perhaps we won't be able to make a living. It's just plain economic pragmatism.
It's a dangerous precedent, it seems to me.
That's exactly the point.
And you're
Yes,
brought up
exactly.
something that's very important, and that is, I think, to most of us here, and that's property rights. I think the actors, it isn't as strong. I know that
It
it's
is.
something that you're concerned
Oh,
with.
it
If they
is.
make a
It
doll
is.
out of an
Oh.
actor, if they make a
It
doll
is.
out of an
No.
actor,
We can
you
get into
use
that
your
in a minute.
face.
Yeah, I mean, that issue.
No, now that you have recording,
Yes.
we have a very complicated problem in that once we have this piece recorded, if it's a Broadway show, an off-Broadway show, we have a lot of different people who have rights in that. Mike Kisser may be out front, but your work is there, and Bernice's work is there, and Dean's work is there. Everyone's work is there. How are we going to control the distribution and exploitation of recorded material in the theater? A good question to which we have not yet found all the answers.
But on our performers seminars, seminar after seminar, the performers talk about getting the experience that they have to become a star or a feature player, whatever it is, by working for nothing, by working in resident companies and by being practically gophers, and that was the only way to learn their trade and get the experience that they did and that they need to become featured actors. You are saying we're protecting you, really, from doing that.
No,
By working for nothing,
No.
because these companies...
Oh, yes.
Because these companies can't afford those. These little companies that are giving them experience can't afford.
Oh, but we
to
have
pay the salaries.
many of those companies throughout the United States where the actors receive a pittance. There are...
Well, you can go into the journeyman, you know, you might go to...
And they're permitted to work, and
They are permitted to work for not a living wage. The actors...
if they feel that this is giving, and this is almost like a barter.
Yes.
I'll work for this because I'm getting the experience of working. Which is
And
what I
they
need.
do.
I think we all have that in various internships, apprenticeships, and all
Not as
things like
actors.
that.
No, we don't have it as
Well, you have the... You have,
yes, you do.
Yes, we do.
All members, ENS, pay nothing.
Would you
come on,
explain?
talk
Is
about
there-
the journeyman, the apprentice, all that stuff.
Well, for those of you too young to remember who were never in the theater, years ago, actors went out and worked in summer stock as apprentices. There was a little rule that if in your second season you did 2 or 3 shows, I don't remember what it was, the third show they had to sign you to an equity contract. And the summer theater has changed dramatically. It practically does not exist. So now we have something called the what is it called?
Membership.
The Equity Membership Candidate Program, and I should know the name because I helped create it 20-some years ago, in which young people, presumably young, still in school or just out of school, work with primarily resident theater companies, although it's been extended to commercial for-profit theaters in some cases. I don't mean to be trivial about it, but they get brownie points toward equity membership, and after they've accumulated enough brownie points, they can take a test, with 40 brownie points and be issued an equity contract, or they can go to get 50 brownie points that represents a
Is
week.
this well-known? Because this is the first time I've heard of it.
Oh, yes. It's quite well known among the regional theaters.
It's also known-
Because, to be
This
candid
is
about it,
constantly,
they
how do
have...
you start? That it's a catch-22 first. You have to be a member and you can't work with non-members, and how do you get onto it?
You do
Equity-
shows without being a member of
That's
equity, and
precisely
then
right.
once you get the job, you become a member of equity.
George didn't ask me, but that's how I got my equity card. I got it by auditioning for a Broadway show and getting the part. The producer didn't care two hoots whether or not I had an equity card. He just wanted to know if I could remember the lines and not bump
What
into
was
the
the show?
furniture.
What was the show?
It was called Howie, had Peggy Conklin in it, and Leon Ames, and a young lady whose name was on the cover of the book review section of the Times either Sunday or the week before, Patricia Bosworth.
Oh, yes.
I was going to leap in and say about joining equity. In fact, I'm a member of Actors Equity as well, and that's how I came in. I did 3 equity shows or whatever. So it is well known, and United Scenic Artists is at the moment developing an intern program, which we hope to put into effect this year.
Shirley and Bernice, you said you have also for your union, you have internships and a developmental
We
program
have
for
to,
people.
actually, we have it on several levels. Some of us have relationships with the various universities around, so that we always get interns and in our offices, and our people do. Then the union itself,
But the interns, let me interrupt for a second, aren't necessarily people that are going to want to join the union. I have interns who just want to see what it's all about.
some of them do, and some of them want to join the unions very much, and realize how important it is. As a matter of fact, I had one university come up just last week, and they brought 4 of their graduating students, and they were MFA students. And we talked and so on, and they went to various places around. They went to SSD&C. And I got a letter back from one of them saying that she was very interested in what was going on in the theater, wanted to work as an intern for one of our members or anybody that she could, either in marketing or as a company manager. And that's how you sort of get into an office and get a start.
Kai, what is the basic Broadway salary for a musical or
I think it's
an opera?
1,044 performers. Chorus people usually make a little bit more because for every special thing they do, there's something called an increment. So while the young actor who comes out and says the coach waits without my lord, I think the basic salary is 1,040 for him or her, and somebody who comes out and sings and dances and does a special number will probably make a little bit more. The stage managers have a different scale.
Yeah.
They get slightly more. As to the rest of the theater, I don't know how many collective bargaining agreements we have for actors and stage managers in this country, but that's the maximum minimum salary, and it goes all the way down to about $125 a week, or even further down to people who are doing showcases, who literally get cart there and no more.
What is that? What is the, if you design a Broadway show, is there a basic
There
floor?
is a basic fee, and I have to say, I don't really remember what it is. There are a lot of...
We cover sets, lights, and costumes, so
Yeah,
there
it
are
varies.
different things.
Yeah.
And then each contract is different depending upon the number of characters, the number of costumes, the number of sets, whether the sets is...
So there's no
multiple-
floor, there's not like...
Well, there is a floor, but it varies, and one problem, or plus, on Broadway these days is it's basically the same 10 designers doing everything.
Yeah.
So they're not working for minimum.
Oh, okay. All right, that's right.
And if you work in the regionals, there are basic
Well, that's
floors
true,
there
that's-
too. But the thing is, it's not a working wage. I mean, it's not a living wage, really. It's to design a show, a couple of thousand, 1,500, but then you get to work for a couple of months to design it, to spend money building models, doing drawings, all kinds of things, and many
1,500
theaters...
doesn't go a long way.
It doesn't go a long way, and many theaters, well, the Lord theaters do not offer per diem, so you end up out of town spending your own money wherever you are. They may offer housing, but you don't know if you're going to show up and find yourself in a room with somebody else. You have to be very careful, and this is where the union becomes useful, because you can call the union and say, I'm going to this theater, what is the housing like, and what kind of tricks have they pulled before? Because I've had that happen to me, where they tell me they're giving me a room, whatever, and I think I'm going to be in a hotel room, and the next thing I find out I have a roommate that I've never met before, and it's very strange. So
Shades of summer
What
style.
about that, Pat? And what is the basic minimum, is it for, let's say, GM and manager, oh, I'm sorry, managers and press?
It's $13.55 for a manager and $15.45 for a press agent. That is on a major show in New York or on the road. But the one thing that the unions do have is the portable pension and the portable health plans, which means that you get paid wherever you go. Each employer pays into the union's plan. And that has been really the greatest thing that's happened.
The health plan particularly.
Barry, who pays you
We're paid by the
as casting agent?
We're paid by the producers. And we don't have a minimum per se, but we get a fee to start the show, and then
You get a fee up front to
fee
cast
up
the
front.
show.
yeah, and then we presumably get paid on the first day of rehearsal. Ha ha. And
Do you have a bonding yet? You don't yet.
No,
Set up.
no. And the problem with casting is, once your job is done, they don't need you, they don't care about you. I've actually gotten thrown out of an opening night saying, what are you doing here? I said, the casting director, I said, well, you can, no one's allowed backstage. I said, if a lighting designer wanted to come back, well, of course, she's the lighting designer. So I mean,
Interesting.
we get no respect.
I'd like to touch on, you were asking about run-ins with other unions, and United Scenic Artists is facing a particular problem, jurisdictional problem. And that is that a lot of our scenic artists that is, people who actually paint the scenery, are not working because the work is being done by IA members, stagehands, outside of the New York City area. And with the advent of Livent, we have shows being built in Canada and brought down here.
I'm going to get into a little bit more of the age-old issue, and I think it is age-old. It certainly ages-old, perhaps, about the fact that the cost of going to the theater and doing the theater has done nothing but escalate over the years. And we talked about Bernie Jacobs before, who always said that that is a legitimate cost, that if you have to spend $65, $75 or more for a ticket, that was what it costs, and everything has gone up. Even pump a nickel is now pump a quarter. I don't know. But
Better be ashamed of yourself.
I'm sorry,
for it.
that wasn't my joke. Anyway, but things have indeed gone up. And let's start with the press agents and managers. Do you feel that first of all, are the prices legit? Is there perhaps, is it overpriced? That's a tough question. I know it's right. And then everybody leap in. And then what's being done, because we can talk about the alliance and the new ideas too coming along. But I want to toss it, because you have to deal first with the money side.
Well,
Is it appropriate?
Well, first place, I have to say that I've been looking for a new car, and I find it amazing how the prices have risen. So I think there's something to say about the fact that everything has gone up in the past 10, 15 years. But I think also you have to take into consideration that you only do 8 shows a week, and you cannot get any more out of it than the 8 shows. If you go to the movies, you can show it that many more times and get your money back that way. Television, you have a huge audience. But here, if you're in a 1,000-seat theater or a 2,000-seat theater, times 8, that's it. And that's all the money that you can make. And when you look at what it costs to run a show in a week, and the amount of money that you get, and the amount of money that the show physically costs, the prices are not out of hand on that score. The fact that they're too much, the answer is yes. How you cut that back, I think, is a matter of artistry, and what people want are quite true.
And you don't think that the actuals are out of line to cost that much? Now, one of the things I was setting you up to, because I know even the advertising in the New York Times, am I not right that it costs more to advertise on the theater page than, let's say, on the lingerie page?
Absolutely. Also, you have to bear in mind that our tickets have no shelf life. If we don't sell that ticket today, we can't sell the same ticket tomorrow. It's not as though we're selling stockings that remain on the shelf to be sold the next day or the following day. So all that has to be taken in consideration.
Then why don't you have a rush program?
A lot of places do, and we have the TDX.
And you have the
booths.
TK
And that-
Yes, not
that-
enough will go, but at the theater, if you knew that you were within an hour of curtain time, well, that you could get
They
tickets for
keep
not
sending-
half price, but lower than that.
Well, Rent has that, certainly. It's one of
Very,
the
a
shows
few
that
of them
does.
have it.
Jacqueline Hyde also, $20 rush.
But people don't want to sit upstairs anymore. It's very interesting. They want the best seats. For the
About
least amount of
14
money.
years ago,
I don't think
when
so.
Macaj opened, Alan Carr said, I want to make a $10 ticket available. People didn't want to walk up to the top of the balcony. They
I
never
find that
sold
hard to
them.
believe.
Oh, no, absolutely true. Really.
Was that the second balcony? That's
And the second
they have
balcony is now
now they have
called the
an
balcony,
elevator.
by the way.
Oh, the others.
It's
the
called what?
mezzanine.
The balcony. You have a mezzanine, and then you have a rear mezzanine.
That's right. That's true.
What about
offered
the $7.50 ticket, because that was what movie prices were at the time. And you can go and see a live Broadway show, hit Broadway show, for the same price as a movie, and nobody wanted to buy those tickets.
And what's the alternative?
Well, I almost hesitate to talk about it because I only read a brief, but something called the Broadway Initiative. Is that? Anyway, there's more talk about facing the economic problems and the lack of good plays on Broadway, not big musicals, but theater as we all remember it. And perhaps creating a monetary pool that might help promote a theater on Broadway, good plays. It's in the formative stages now, but I think the important thing is that there is a willingness among the creative folks on Broadway to do something about the dearth of plays. Although
also
this season there have been some damn
The
good
season,
ones.
though, had
You're including the theater owners and the creative people because they are very much behind it too, the Broadway Initiative.
Is that what this was called? I also want to get in a little bit about that because, again, it's protecting. We know about the, we were getting into now the financial side. There's another side that unions and guilds and societies have to address and are addressing more and more, which we've started to talk about it in terms of recordings, but that is the, quote, intellectual property protection beyond the financial, and out of that obviously comes royalties and possible merchandising rights and Julianne, maybe you can talk a little bit about, the issues like the director that does something, where does the director's work start and the playwright's end and all of that?
Yeah, well, that actually is a big issue facing the Society of Stage Directors and Choreographers right now. We actually have a case that we're going to court on involving, some of you might have read about it, Love, Valor, and Compassion. Joe Mantella directed the original Broadway Alliance production of Terrence McNally's play, and the script, for instance, the director directed the play. At the top of the play, Terrence McNally has in the script a bare stage. Well, Joe Mantella came up with a big hill, a mound, to signify the Adirondacks or something. And there's a little dollhouse on the top of this mound. This is the scenic element. He worked with the set designer. They came up with this thing. The 4 or 5 men in the show were in certain positions at the top of the show to show their relationships. This was not written in the script. Well, Joe Mantella found out that there was a production in Florida that had the same set and the same positions of the actors, indeed the same relationships. At one point, Terrence McNally has in the script, the young men go to their separate bedrooms. Well, there were no separate bedrooms. There was just this little hill with a dollhouse on it. So what he did is he had square, he said he wanted the bedroom signified by different squares of light. Again, he worked with the lighting designer, and those Brian McDevitt. And so there were 5 pools of light, and each actor was in a different pool of light. Well, when Joe saw that production down in Florida, it's the exact same positions. That is not in the script. So, who owns What is the contribution? In our union's very strong feeling is, as you can tell, that the director, this is a surprise, that the director owns his work, that a script is written. There's the script. It becomes dimensional. And the director not only moves the actors around, but he contributes something to the relationships of those characters, and sometimes it can be quantified. I mean, sometimes it can't. But I think the designers, if I'm not mistaken, are joining in this.
Yes.
They have their own suit because lawyer Cenas, who did the set design, feels that his set design was duplicated. And our feeling is that, you know, if you want to duplicate the work, it's okay, but you know what? You got to pay us for it. You got to tell us ahead of time. You got to give credit to the person, and you have to pay us for it. So this is, I think, a really big problem for directors, for designers. And it's when you originate a production, if you see your work follow, you know, and you know it's your work, it's not, you know, what was in the script. And so it's important that I think as creators, as creative artists on a project, that we get our due or recognition in some way. And if Joe Mantello says, hey, yeah, great, you can do it, that's great, do my work, I'll even sign off on it. Maybe he doesn't want compensation. I think in this point he does. But I think at one point, you know, as long as you're acknowledged to some extent or you're reimbursed are the two ways.
Well, you get, but certainly you get from either Dramatist Play Service or Samuel French, you get a script. You get the script and it says, you know, Charlie moves down left. Right. I mean, that's director's work, probably, or not the playwright. It's picked up from the production. How do you protect that?
Okay, now you brought up the other problem. Because,
on purpose.
Thank you. The other problem that we didn't realize that when we started all of this, I mean, we didn't look for this, but it sort of came to us that people were saying, well, you have to look at the Samuel French version or the Dramatist Play Service or Thames Woodmark or whatever it is. And so how do they get that script? And if that's the director's work, how did that get in there? So one of the things we say is that in the past, the stage manager has always provided the production script to the publishers, and they actually get paid to prepare the script, but the director doesn't get anything for the director's work, his or her directions. And so we're saying the same thing to the publishers. You know, this is done in amateur theaters or professional theaters all over the country, and the director's work is in there. And it doesn't belong to the playwright, it doesn't belong to the publishing company. But if the playwright wants to make a deal with the director and say, I'll pay you, I want to put this in the script, or the playwright could say to the publisher, if you want, I don't care if it's there, but if you wanted to sell your play better, then reimburse the person who did it, or get them to sign off if they don't necessarily want money. It just hasn't been a practice in the past, and we're seeing that it's all in, and you know, it's a collaboration. Theater is really a collaboration,
and
I
there's
think,
the rub.
And everyone has to recognize that we're not little islands, that we work together, but that also means that we all get reimbursed for our work.
Well, one way to
No, go on.
one way is to copyright the work.
Absolutely, good
Now,
point.
how do we copyright the work? I'll give you the solution and the problem that keeps it from working. Because we've had choreographers who say, let me take the tape from Lincoln Center and send it to Washington and copyright my work. Not so easy, because everybody else also has a right to control that work. The performers, the dancers, whoever may have written the music, who may have written the lyrics, they all have a right in this. And what has not been achieved yet is cooperation among all of the creative personnel who have contributed to that tape, which could be used to copyright the director's work and the choreographer's work, and sometimes, although it would be rare, even what the actor may have done, because I was in a play off Broadway where we created a lot of the
I agree
dialogue.
with you.
Well, we can't. It's very, very hard. We've had to. Directors want a tape, one, to sell their work or to document it, but we've got to get permission from all of those other people, because we can't rely on the fact the director will guarantee that nothing ever will happen to that tape other than its intended purpose.
Is the Center Library enough for that, if it's just for documentation that they want?
I
have it
think
there?
that you have to send the work
send it
to Washington
Yeah,
to
it
get it
does.
copyrighted.
see.
The
And
choreographers have it a little easier because they can labanotate their work. They can write it down. The director, it's harder for you to figure out exactly what the director has done.
Well, you know, I wanted
Yeah.
to know how you could differentiate between the playwright's directions and the director who is following the playwright's directions, doesn't add anything to it except his persuasion or his tone in speaking to the actors or whatever it might be, but he is following the directions that the playwright has set down.
I think Isabel, you're giving the best of all possible worlds. I mean, I think we do a little bit more than like persuade people in a tone of voice, although that's also very important. I think one of the ways that we're trying to, we haven't figured out how to do this. If we did, believe me, we would have everything copywritten, and we're working on it. I think one of the things that we feel is if we look at the script at the beginning of the rehearsal, and we see what stage directions are given there, what's in the script, and if you look at the script at the end of rehearsal, the easiest things to figure out are the actual stage directions, the actual moves. The fact that a scene changes or the motivation or the end of the play changes after the director and the playwright have had a lot of conversations with the actors, we're going over the scene, but the director's there working with the playwright behind the scenes, and we have to figure out a way that some of those contributions, we had Jerry Gutierrez directed a production of The Most Happy Fellow, and one of the interesting things that he was able to do is he actually reorganized the numbers in the show, changed scenes around, and introduced props in numbers that had not been there originally. He was able to copyright that.
And document that.
He documented it and copywrote it so that when it came up that someone literally took his production and said to the actors, do what you saw in the New York production, he had his documented. So it's very difficult, but we're encouraging directors to get the work copywritten.
It's really an Excedrin headache.
Yes.
Because I.
Yeah, how do you feel?
Because I, as a director too, you work with an actor. Now the actor is doing a lot of creativity with the director on top of the playwright's input. So it is collaborative, and the actor brings something that perhaps the director was the midwife to that inspiration of the actor, or maybe it was the other way. The actor said, hey, what if I do this? Wouldn't this be great? And the director says, hey, wow, that's great. And then who gets
I have to jump in with a little anecdote. Well, I was taught by Sidney Lumet at the School of Performing Arts, and he says, now what we're going to do is we're going to take the play and we're going to eliminate all the stage direction.
Right, yeah.
We will pay absolutely no attention to what the playwright said or anybody at Samuel French may have said.
Yeah.
I'm establishing director's rights here. We have some questions, and would you come up?
You're talking about how people get trained earlier in the earlier seminar, and I was happy that the program existed. And now I'm an equity member, and I'm wondering what the upcoming changes regarding the union
Well,
affecting people.
it simply will come down to everybody will have the opportunity to audition, but the equity actors will audition as equity actors, and the non-equity actors will also be given the opportunity by the producers to audition, which in effect is really what was when I joined the theater. There were no mandated auditions at all. And then we achieved mandated auditions in our contracts, and then someone found a piece of legislation that we were aware of that you can't discriminate against, and now we're simply cleaning that up, and everybody will have a chance to get the job, but the equity actors would like to audition as equity actors.
Returning to the issue of a director's intellectual property rights, do you think if a legal definition of director's property rights is achieved, that it could actually cause a rift between dramatists and directors and actually undermine the collaborative process?
I hope not. I think that a director's work is a director's work and a playwright's work is a playwright's work. Actually, in the case that I was just talking about, Love, Valor, and Compassion, Terrence McNally is very supportive of Joe Mantella's claim. So in this instance, this certainly has not been a problem. I think that it's important, as George was saying, I mean, we're collaborating, and I think we all have to realize that this is a collaboration, that everyone has to get paid or represented in some way for his or her efforts. And it may be a a new beginning. I mean, it may be a new way that we look at things. I mean, certainly with the Broadway Alliance, there's just so many new ways of looking at theater nowadays. I think this may be one of them.
I think it's also happening more and more because very well-known directors are working with well-known playwrights and getting part of the subsidiary rights in their original contracts.
I'd like to have a quick go-around. How many members do each one of you represent? Do you have...
We start over here.
649.
How many?
649, of which two-thirds are managers.
We have about 2,500.
About 1,200.
39,000. 32,000 paid up. I'm the treasurer. So
All right. We have about 360.
We're somewhat smaller.
Obviously highest bid. This has been really a most interesting and important seminar. And I think that it's splendid that you were able to be so open and so generous with your knowledge and share it not only with us but with each other. And you're such an important part of the theater. I can't let you go away without my saying I just wish that you ate as well as you did and got as much money for your members as you do, but that the ticket price wouldn't be so high, so more of us can go to the theater. That's what the constant plea that I hear as I go around the streets and these seminars and on the buses is why is the ticket price so high? And then somebody says, it's the unions. You've explained very well that it is not the unions only. Thank you so much for being here. It's the American Theater Wing Seminar on Working in the Theater, coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. Thank you.